before I started working for the campaign, although I'd been connected with the campaign since
You started.
Mike came to town, and my companion and I heard of him. We called him up. 2 nights later, he's eating antelope steaks in our house, and we want to know, what are you going to do? And um, when Phil heard about video documenting the insanity that was going on against the buffalo, he was Mr. Original Vidiot. He started the first video art program at the Art Institute of Chicago. And he always said, don't do my art, do your art. So here we're independent videographers coming, and but every time the word gets out, we get a tremendous number of phone calls from people like, why are you doing that? And before I started working here, I worked at the Bookworm on Main Street in West Yellowstone for 10 years. And people would come in and they would be enraged at what Montana was doing to the buffalo. Why are you killing them? And my boss never supported any other groups, but he had our sticker in the window. We gave out newsletters when they were going to kill the 300 buffalo in the spring of 2007. He came in the next day and was so enraged, and he said, can BFC design a bookmark? And in 2 days, we had 500 bookmarks that we were putting into every single purchase. And it had, stop the slaughter message, but on the back side, it had all the contact information of the Muckamucks who were implementing this plan. And what people need to understand is that people don't come to West Yellowstone to see cattle, you know. They come to West Yellowstone because they want to go into the park and stay out of the park and see wildlife, including wild buffalo. And when you see these buffalo with these ear tags and collars and, vaginal probes, I mean, it's just such a violation to the cow buffalo. And of course, we don't do that to the bulls. But, people have to understand that, it's it's not about brucellosis. It's about grass. And the bill that came up in the legislature this week was just an absolutely perfect example of how it's not about brucellosis, because, for 3 years we've had 200 buffalo in quarantine and they're brucellosis free, right? And now the state legislature is trying to get a law passed that says we can't give those buffalo to Native American tribes or anybody else in Montana or anywhere in the country, that they have to remain in this quarantine. So what was the purpose of spending millions of dollars, testing and probing and violating the bodies of these buffalo? And then they say, and it's part of the IBMP plan, and then they say, no, we're going to change the plan. We're not going to allow them to go anyplace. They're going to be prisoners. It's kind of like our little Guantanamo, over on the north side of the park. And it's like, no charges, no trial. You're just there forever. And but last year, when the slaughter was going on, you asked about what keeps you going. The sadness and the anger. You're sitting here, you can't even keep up with the figures that are coming over the radios. Another 200 have been shipped out. Another 100. And at the bottom of every email, I had this madness, 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 and I'd document, how many was sent to slaughter, how many was sent to quarantine, and of course we did that in the update too. But I did it on all my personal emails too, because people have to understand that this is being done with federal funds in their name. And I just, I know I've always been of the belief that if you didn't get the hunters involved, that nothing was going to really change. And I have personally spent a lot of time talking to hunters. Phil was a very avid hunter. And it's only now that they're going after the elk that there's any kind of outrage, with the exception of the Gallatin Wildlife Association, which is the only hunter sportsman's group in the entire state to oppose the buffalo hunt. It's against how we do every single wildlife management program. We have, we buy the habitat if we don't have it. We establish a resident herd, and then we take a percentage of that herd number and say, okay, we're issuing X number of tags, right? The first year of the hunt, every single buffalo that walked out of the west side of the park was shot. You don't allow that with elk or deer or moose or anybody, And it was just like, this is so outrageous. And yet, there was this attitude among a lot of hunters that I talked to that, well, if we don't shoot them, then they're just going to give the food to the Native Americans. And, we can't do anything to benefit Native Americans. And they didn't realize that a lot of Native Americans didn't want the food coming to them via this method of slaughter. But, food banks all accepted the food because Montana is really desperate for food bank food. So, I don't know. The last year, all of us just kept, okay, we're going to go to the phone and call the legislator or call this person or write a letter to the editor. And we just kept saying, endless pressure, endlessly applied. Brock Evans, Endangered Species Coalition, and one of our supporters. But, it's just like keeping in mind that this isn't the short run.
What happened last season?
What happened last season is that we had this hunt from November 15th to February 15th, and 166 buffalo were killed. And that was, 44 state hunters, and then there were 2 tribal hunts. 3 tribal hunts. As soon as the hunt ended, any buffalo walking out of the park on the north side of the park was put into the Stevens Creek capture facility and sent off to slaughter. And it was just nonstop the whole spring. We wound up with almost 1,600 dead buffalo, the largest kill-off since the 1800s. And people across the country were just enraged that we could do this, that the Park Service, who's supposed to protect the wildlife, was participating in this program. I expect the Department of Livestock and APHIS to be against the buffalo, because their mandate is to protect ranchers' interests. I do not expect the Forest Service to say, no, they can't go on public lands. FWP to say, no, we don't want to manage them. We don't want to have the target on our back. And the Park Service, to all of them, to participate in this absolutely insane program. And I just get more gray hair every time I hear another one of their plans, because they always try to take over the media and frame the question that these are diseased animals that need management control. And how the two outbreaks of brucellosis in this state have now been blamed on the elk with no scientific evidence. The rancher didn't want to allow us to take samples, blood samples and tissue samples from his cattle. And so we couldn't find out where's the genealogy. But these people, the DOL and APHIS, are able to go on TV in Montana and say, well, it's 99% sure that it's elk, when there's no evidence, there's no scientific evidence. And they conveniently lose tissue samples. Now, I'm sorry, I'm too old not to be cynical, How come when it might be saying, well, no, the buffalo weren't responsible and neither were the elk, how come the evidence gets lost? And they're so untrustworthy to me, that I write my letters and I make my phone calls because I'm a good buffalo mama, but then it gets so tiring, like when is this madness gonna end, And this year here we have no buffalo out of the park since day one of the hunting season, when one bull was killed in Gardner. And you don't know whether to feel good about that or bad about it. I feel sad that here we are in the middle of February, third week in February, and I haven't seen one buffalo, instead of seeing, 50, 100 along the roadside or on Horse Butte at this time of the year. And then, they're in the park. And from what I have heard from friends of mine who are snow coach drivers and snowmobile tour guides, they're seeing buffalo at Fountain Flats, at Lower Geyser Basin, and Kathleen went snowshoeing among a herd of 25 buffalo on Specimen Ridge on the north side of the park. But they're seeing small herds, and the reason that they're seeing them there is that it's very windy in that area, and since we haven't had a lot of snow, the ground is exposed and they're able to eat. But nobody I know believes the 3,000 to 3,500 population figure that the Park Service is putting out. Nope, because it goes against what your eyes are seeing. There are no buffalo the whole winter between the West Gate and Madison Junction. None. There are usually hundreds there, because that's where they come and that's where they go across the river and then they flow out into Duck Creek and Horse Butte. None.
And yet when they come out this spring, are they going to get killed all over again? What do you think is going to happen?
They're supposed to have more tolerance until May 15th. Come May 15th, they are very committed to killing the buffalo, to pushing them back. On the west side, they've been pushing them back for the last 2 years. But it's like, there's this kind of genetic imprint. We don't deny rainbow trout from going up their creek, laying their eggs. Well, the cow buffalo that come out in the spring, the hundreds of them that come out in the spring, are going back to their birthing grounds, right? On Horse Butte, mainly. And we're supposed to have more tolerance up to this cutoff date of May 15th. And there are no cattle around here until June 15th to July 1st. But it's this power play by the ranchers, and incidentally, the Montana stock growers are opposing this adaptive management plan of tolerance from February 15th to May 15th. Now, why would you oppose that? Is there any grazing land here for your cattle right now? No. And how many cattle do we have in this area? It's like so minuscule in terms of the state's economy, and juxtapose that against the tourism economy of West Yellowstone. And 2 years ago, they went with helicopters. And this was in May. They came down with the helicopters, and they were hazing the buffalo through the Baker's Hole campground. Now, gee, I would go back to Iowa and tell my friends, if you're going to go to Yellowstone, you might want to stay in Cody or Jackson or Gardner, rather than have these, a herd of 50 buffalo being stampeded through your campground with no warning. And it's like, that's really good for our economy. Let's spend more of that travel Montana money, to...
So this is the whole reason how I've been able to stay for 12 years, because the buffalo attract the most beautiful people I've ever met in my life.
We just have to remember it's the long haul. And but when in January of 2006, when the Department of Livestock on snow machines was herding 50 buffalo across the lake at the Narrows, and 14 of them went into the water. 2 of them jumped out right away, and our friend, who used to be the former office queen, lives right there. And she called me in town. I sent out 150 emails in 10 minutes. And Mike and Danny and the whole crew was down there documenting what was going on. And for 3 hours, they couldn't figure out what to do, And you see in our video, and I don't know if you've seen that footage, but you see in our video these buffalo struggling to get out of the water. And of course, every time they put their front quarters on the ice breaks. And then you see their bodies rippling from the cold. And you see their eyes turning blue, and, they're just out of it. And finally, they decide to lasso them out. And 2 of them died in the water. They couldn't make it out. But there's one scene where this cow is being pulled across the ice, and this DOL agent goes up and kicks her in the ass. And it's like, another piece of disregard and disrespect you know. And I always say to people, you know, if you treated your dogs, your cats, your horses, your cattle like the state of Montana treats buffalo, you'd be in jail for animal abuse. It's just very, very simple to me. So, you know, that's what I have to keep putting out, you know, that it's not about the disease, you know, it's about power and control of land use. And, you know, I've been involved in the buffalo issues since 1994 when I moved to Montana. And I'm going to die standing up for the buffalo because it's just, it's not right. And if we care about any wildlife, we have to care about what's done to the buffalo. Because you can see the inroads starting, you know, they're now trying to target the elk. The elk in this state have a very, very strong constituency of hunters and guides, outfitters, the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation. But those organizations need to understand that they're going to do the same thing. You let up your guard, they're going to do the same thing as Little Buffalo Field Campaign with, you know, an annual budget of probably one executive's salary, maybe two, in these bigger organizations. This is what we've been plotting out and plotting and plotting and plotting and showing. You know, if we weren't in the field, nobody would know about it, basically. You know, it's one thing for, you know, a magazine to send a newspaper, a journalist from back east to spend 2 weeks in Yellowstone, you know, and they get all the official talk, you know, and this is very, very on the ground. And I think it is probably the most valuable thing that the campaign does, to document it and get it out there in the media. Danny Brister's photograph of those buffalo in the water struggling was on the front page of every newspaper in Montana except the Missoulian. And it was all over the country, all over the country. And you know, Montana has this little provincial idea that these buffalo belong to them, you know, and the hearts of millions of people are with the buffalo and not with the Department of Livestock or the other politicians. So, anyway. Okay.
You got that one. Good thing you weren't
get
going to
me
talk.
started.
I was going to say, good thing you weren't going to talk there.
Yeah, don't get me started. You know, Matt had to go ask that question.
I got that one at least. You got all those?
Yeah.
All right.
So,
You're beautiful.
it's for you. This is my closest buddy in the campaign.
The feeling's mutual. She keeps me in line. Yeah.
You don't mess around with a woman from Brooklyn. Ever. Ever.